Hi guys, my name is Natalia and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share a list of books I've given 5 stars, so my favorite books basically. Now, these are technically not all of the books because there are some books I read and rated like many years ago, and I'm not sure if I would still rate them 5 stars, so I'm skipping those and I will only talk about books that I remember quite well and I know that they still deserve 5 stars in my opinion. So before we get started, I tried to do my makeup in like a different way today with like these rhinestones. I've seen like a lot of people do this, but I don't know why I've never tried it, but I did it and I actually really like it. Like, it's just something different than what I usually do, and I feel like a little fairy princess or something like that. I don't know, what do you guys think? Anyway, let's get into the actual video. The first 2 books that I want to talk about, it's a duology actually. They are, I would say, quite popular within the book community, so you might already know them, but these books are Six of Crows, which is the first book, and Crooked Kingdom, which is the second book in this duology, and this series is written by Leigh Bardugo. This is one of those books that really just made me go, oh my god, I love reading so much. This series follows group of outcasts who are brought together for an impossible heist. All of these characters are like so funny and so distinctive, and the female characters are so badass. Like, I love all of these characters, especially Breaker. I mean, he's like morally gray character, but I love him so much. Well, it is like a rather like dark book, but there is a lot of like humor in it. There's so many quotes that I remember just made me laugh out loud. I just love these books so much and I will never stop recommending them. So if you are into high stakes plots with morally gray characters and like strong friendships, it does have the found family trope, which is one of my favorite tropes of all time, and it's done so well in this book. So I just love this book and it's definitely one of my favorites, and I did give both of them 5 stars because they definitely deserve it. The next book that I gave 5 stars, I read it for the first time a few years ago and I reread it recently, and I decided that it still deserves 5 stars, and that book is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. This is like a fantasy book about this magical school, and we follow Simon Snow, who is a chosen one. Like, he's this chosen one that is supposed to defeat this like creature that is trying to destroy the magical world. Simon has a roommate at the school. His roommate is Baz. He's here, and he is like I would say like a grumpy vampire, and they really don't like each other at first. They call each other like sworn enemies, but they will eventually start realizing their feelings for each other, which is just so nice to see. Like, I love enemies to lovers trope, and I think it was just done so well in this book. Just Simon and Baz's relationship is so adorable. I love them so much. One of my favorite book couples of all time. I just, in general, like, I find these characters and like this whole like world like so comforting. But this book still has like edge to it. It still has some action, you know. It's not like super cozy. Like, I do feel comfort while reading it, but it does also contain some like action and some edge to it. So I think it's just a really fun fantasy read that in my opinion definitely deserves 5 stars. So the next 5-star read that I would want to recommend to you is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. So this is a trilogy, but I only gave 5 stars to the first book because there's just something like really special about it, and I think it's mainly because of Scarlett and Julian. So in this book, Scarlett is like the protagonist, and then in the second book, the protagonist is actually her sister Donatella, and then in the last book they like narrate this story interchangeably, but this book is like all about Scarlett, and Julian is going to be like her love interest, and I love their relationship and dynamics so much. I think that's why I ended up giving it 5 stars. But obviously there's a lot about this book that I really like. It's so whimsical and magical. So Scarlett enters this game or competition, if you will, because she wants to rescue her sister. But this game is like really tricky because the illusion really blends with reality, so it's hard to tell what is real and what is not. So I had so much fun seeing Scarlett try to rescue her sister and try to go through this game, and also Julian helping her. Just, I love this book so much, and I feel like it's a perfect fall read. It really gives off really strong fall vibes, so if you haven't read it yet, this might be a good time to pick it up. The next book on my list is classic that I'm sure everyone knows, but it's called Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I originally read it in Polish, which is my native language. I don't know, I was a bit apprehensive to read it in English because I was not sure if I will like truly understand everything. But I definitely had so much fun reading it, and I was a bit surprised because it is like character driven, a little slower story, which I'm usually a high stakes kind of girl. I love books where there's lots of action, there are high stakes, a lot is happening, but this one was more chill and slow. But I think I really liked the way Jane Austen wrote her characters. There was so much like witty banter, and you could learn a lot about the society from that time. And of course we've got the like romance, I guess you call it like the original enemies to lovers story, which I also really enjoyed. And I don't know, I just remember having so much fun reading it, and I was so immersed in this world, so I ended up giving it 5 stars. Okay, the next 3 books are a series. I don't want to take them all out, but it's basically The Cruel Prince, The Wicked King, and The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. So it is a trilogy, and I literally gave all of these books 5 stars. And the funny thing is, with each book I felt like it's even better than the previous one. Like when I read this one, I was like, oh my god, it's so good. Then I read the second book and I was like, it's even better. And then I read the last book and I was like, oh gosh, it's even better. I do think all of them deserve 5 stars. It's just such a good series. So it is like probably the best enemies to lovers trope that I've ever seen. It's really, really intense, and it's also really slow burn. So if you are into that, I definitely recommend this series. So in this series we follow Jude, who is like a very strong and fierce protagonist, which I love. And she was actually born in like a normal human world, but she was forced to start living in the fairy world. I don't want to give away too much, but so she lives in the fairy world, but she is a human. So they do like pick on her a lot, and it's just like not really easy for her because like the fairies in this world, they are really like ruthless. There's a lot of like tension and a lot of political intrigue. It has really high stakes. It's really intense. The romance is just amazing. It is one of my favorite series, like definitely along with Six of Crows. I always think of these books are like my top favorites, and I could give them like 10 stars if I could, because they are so good and I love them so much. The next book that I've given 5 stars is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. Honestly, the cover is probably one of my favorite covers of all time. It's so beautiful and it perfectly shows you the like atmosphere of the book. Like, this is literally what this book feels like. It has like very mysterious and haunting atmosphere. It combines some fantasy elements with mystery and dark academia. So if you like those things, especially combined together, then you might really enjoy this book. I enjoyed it a lot. In this book, we follow Effie, and she has to renovate the house of like an author that passed away recently, and he was also her favorite author. But there's like some weird things happening and some weird things coming up about this author, and some like mysteries that she has to solve, and she will actually be solving them together with another student that happened to be at the house, and they will also end up in like a little romance together. And I actually really love the romance in this book. Anyway, I really enjoyed this book. It has such a haunting atmosphere. Again, this one also has very strong fall vibes, so if you're looking for something like dark and moody to read this fall, then you might want to check this book out. The next two books on my list are a duology. The first book is called Divine Rivals, and the second book is called Ruthless, Vows, and these are written by Rebecca Ross. It's like a very beautifully written, heartfelt fantasy romance. It's also set in a world where there is like a war between gods. So it does talk a lot about like the brutal reality of war. So it is really emotional, especially the second book. It really made me bawl my eyes out. It was so sad and emotional. The love story is so beautiful. Rebecca Rose's writing is just so beautiful. Like, she really made me fall in love with this world and these characters. There's a lot of beautiful friendships too, apart from the romance. Just, it's so beautiful. You have to read it and you have to experience it yourself. This is also like one of my top books. Okay, the next one is a bit different. I've been raving about fiction books so much, and there's one non-fiction book that I put on my list. I will admit I don't read non-fiction books as much as I read fiction books, but sometimes if there's like a topic that I want to learn more about, or some topic that I'm really interested in, I do sometimes pick up a non-fiction book. This one I picked up when I was like in a very dark place. The book that I'm talking about is called How to Be Yourself, Quiet Your Inner Critic, and Rise Above Social Anxiety, and it's written by Ellen Hendrickson. So as you can tell by the title, this book basically talks about social anxiety, and it explains a lot about how the brain of people with social anxiety works. And I think this book really gives a lot of hope, because even the author, she said she used to really suffer from social anxiety, but it's gotten a lot better. So I think reading something like that gave me hope. Also, reading all of these like symptoms and knowing that I'm not the only person going through something like that, it was really reassuring. You know, it just made me feel a bit less lonely, because it can definitely make you feel lonely. It's obviously already difficult to socialize with people, but socializing with other people that don't have social anxiety and don't understand this, it's even more difficult. And actually, I think I will reread this book soon. It did contain like a lot of useful tips and just, you know, things that can help you at least a little bit. And, you know, it's been a while since I read it, so I will admit I forgot a lot of it. So I think I want to reread it and really focus on trying to make use of those tips and tricks in real life. And I think even if you haven't been diagnosed with social anxiety, I wasn't back when I first read it. Now I actually was diagnosed with it. But even if you're not diagnosed, but you just feel like someone that's really shy, socially awkward, you don't really like talking to people, especially new people, or like it really makes you so nervous to the point that it's hindering your life, or like if you're just generally an introvert that finds human like social interactions so awkward, I think you can still really benefit from this book. So I think it was very well written book. It was very easy to understand. It had a lot of like relatable stories and personal tips. So I really enjoyed that one, and I definitely will have to reread it soon. Okay, the next book on my list I don't know. I think I was originally going to give it 4.5 stars, but I did end up giving it 5 stars, so it is on this list. I still think it is a very good book, so let's talk about it. It's called The Sun Down Motel by Simone St. James. It's like a very spine-chilling thriller mystery that has like a bit of a supernatural twist to it. The supernatural twist being ghosts. It's not like mainly about ghosts. I thought like the ghosts are going to be like the main concern, but they are not. Basically, there's this woman that works at this Sundown Motel, but this motel has really, really creepy atmosphere. Like reading about this motel and like reading this book in general got me so spooked. I was really scared during certain moments. I think the author really managed to create this really scary and haunting atmosphere. But anyway, this woman, she actually ends up missing. So she was doing her shift at the motel and she went missing and nobody ever found her. We don't know what happened to her. And many years later, her niece is trying to find out what happened to her, and it's really chilling, really interesting. There were actually also some characters I really liked, which usually doesn't happen when I read thrillers. I usually read them mainly for the plot, but having like some characters that I was like really rooting for and I really liked definitely elevated the experience for me, so I ended up giving it 5 stars. The next book that I've given 5 stars is The Dead Romantics by Ashley Poston. It is like a romance book, but it has magical realism in it. I really like Ashley Poston's romance books because they're not like smutty or like, you know what I mean. They're not cringy, at least to me. At least I don't remember them being cringy. They're actually like really, really beautiful stories. I'm talking like I've only read 2 books by her, but they both were just written so beautifully. So in this story, we follow a ghostwriter who actually ends up meeting a little ghost, and you know she will be like trying to kind of help him pass on to the other side. So yeah, it might sound a bit strange at first and I was not sure about it either, but I was definitely really satisfied with the conclusion to this story, and I thought it was just beautiful story. It was a bit sad because the protagonist is dealing with the loss of her father, so the author is exploring the theme of grief, which is difficult to read about, I will admit it. And the second book by the same author that I just talked about is called The 7-Year Slip, and I also gave this one 5 stars. Again, it's also a romance with magical realism in it, but this one talks about time traveling. So our protagonist Clementine starts living in an apartment that her aunt, who passed away recently, used to live in. And one day she finds like a strange man in her apartment. So at first, you know, she doesn't really know what is happening, but later it will be like revealed that he was staying at this same apartment, but it was 7 years ago, so he's living 7 years in the past. So it is really interesting. Again, it's such a beautiful and touching love story, and this one also explores the theme of grief because, like I said, our protagonist has recently lost her aunt. So again, it's also a bit sad. I don't read romance books that much, to be honest, but these 2 are the ones that I can definitely recommend. They just made such a huge impression on me. The next book on my list is called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. This one is definitely the best thriller, especially YA thriller that I've ever read. It is a trilogy, but I only gave the first book 5 stars because I thought it was the best one and the strongest one this series. In this book, we follow Pip, who is a high school student that is trying to solve this case. Well, technically it was solved, but she thinks that the guy that was blamed didn't do it, and she's trying to prove it and really find out what happened that night. It is like a small town mystery, which I love. It has a bit of romance in it. Like, it's not really the main theme in this book, but it is like a subplot. I really like Pip and Ravi's relationship because they are so cute together, and Ravi is just so perfect and supportive, and I just love this couple so much. Actually, recently, Netflix came up with a show based on this book. I haven't finished watching it. I only watched the first few episodes. I do like it, although I don't like that they changed a few like very crucial details. I was not really happy with that. I still have to finish that show, so maybe I will let you know later what I think about it. But the book itself definitely deserves 5 stars. The mystery was crazy. The plot twists in this book are just insane. And I had so much fun unraveling this mystery, and I've read so many books by Holly Jackson, but this one will always be my number one, and I think it's the best book that Holly Jackson has ever written, so I highly recommend it. The next book that I gave 5 stars, I actually think it's a bit underrated. I don't see many people talking about it, but I thought it was such a good book, and it's called Angelfall by Susan E. It's actually a trilogy, but I gave 5 stars only to the first book. Like, I still enjoyed the other 2 books, but I think this one was definitely the best, and I enjoyed it so much. This is like a dystopian novel where angels come down to earth, but they're not necessarily, the kind and loving angels that we know, but they are quite brutal, and they are trying to really take over the earth. I would say this book is quite dark. I would say unless you're not like really sensitive, you'll be fine with this book. It's not that graphic or anything, just a little bit, okay? I loved the concept of this book. It's just filled with intense action and emotion, so if you feel like you would enjoy something like this, then I definitely recommend this entire trilogy, and especially this first book. I read it twice, and each time I enjoyed it a lot, so it has received 5 stars from me. Okay, and the last book on my list is Shadow Kiss by Rochelle Mead. It is the 3rd book in the Vampire Academy series. I'm like still in the middle of rereading this series, so I can't really talk about all of these books. There are 6 books in total in this series. I've only reread it up to this 3rd book, and I decided to give it 5 stars just because I think so far it was the best book in this whole series. It was just so intense and emotional. The first time I read it, I was like a teenager and I was still getting into reading. I think this is actually the series that really first got me into reading. So I will admit there's a lot of nostalgia going on when I read it, and that might have affected my rating a little bit. I don't know. It's possible, but I still think it is a decent series, and I really love the characters. I probably just feel so attached to them because, yeah, I fell in love with them when I was a teenager. Basically, it is about vampires and this like secret school for vampires that our protagonist is attending. But yeah, there's just a lot of different obstacles that they have to deal with in each of these books. It is very interesting. This one was really emotional and action-packed, and like the romance really picked up in this one. I love this book so much, and I decided to give it 5 stars. This was the last book on my list. I will say that there's really a lot of books I ended up giving 4.5 stars. It's just like I really enjoyed them, but I wasn't sure if they were really 5-star material. You could say I am a little bit picky when I'm rating a book 5 stars. So very often, if I really like the book, but I think something is missing maybe, or I didn't really feel that it's like a 5-star read, then I will end up giving it 4.5 stars. If I gave all of those books 5 stars, this list would be way longer, but maybe it's a good thing because I don't want to make this video too long. I really just wanted to highlight the books that I liked the most, that left the biggest impression on me. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!